Ruby, do you want? Oh, there we go. Okay, now we are now officially recording. So, Ruby, do you want to go through this, or you want me to?
I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah. William Wise.
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall. Here. Rebecca Harper. Here. Jennifer Smith. Here. Nara Del Baca. And she's present on Zoom. Robert Geary. And then a fire district representative.
Paul Blues.
Okay. Next, we have consideration of minutes from September 18th, 2023, and then November 27th, 2023. I will hand the room over to you.
Okay, so minutes from September 18th. Does the task force have any questions, edits? Give me a second.
We do have a hand raised in the Zoom room, just to let you know.
Okay, cool. I'll get to that in just a moment.
Community member call and say that Andrew is being recorded or heard on the Zoom?
We can't hear you on the Zoom? Huh.
I'm not sure if they're worried about the recording.
We just started recording a little late.
So that's probably what it is.
Okay. Awesome.
All right,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, the task force has no questions or edits for the September 18th task force meeting. We'll go ahead and take a look in the Zoom room. Andrew, I cannot see raised hands, so if you want to call them out, that'd be
The
awesome.
raised hand was just lowered. It was from guest, and I'm going to guess that was Angela maybe, and she was the one who maybe just called in to make sure the meeting's being recorded. So,
Okay. Angela, or guest, if you cannot hear Andrew, go ahead and raise your hand again, because we want to make sure, I don't know why that would be going wrong, but we want to make sure that everybody can hear us. Super. Okay, so we'll bring back September 18th minutes for consideration, motion, and action. At any time. Good.
I'll make a motion to approve the September 18th minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Awesome. Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the reconsideration and adoption of those minutes? 5-0. We'll move on to the November 27th minutes. Are there any questions, recommended edits by the task force? You guys see eyeballs back on me. I'll know we're good to move forward to the Zoom room.
we have another hand raised.
We have another hand raised? Okay.
Yes.
Hold on a second. We'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Takes me back to my substitute teaching days. I see eyeballs back on me. We'll move forward in our discussion. Kevin, do you intend to abstain? We may not have quorum on this vote then, because it would be the majority of the whole body, and we're missing one, which takes us down to 7. But no, I mean, it still is an 8, so we still have to have 5.
But Nara was there. And she's not.
But she's online, she can't vote. Yeah. All right. I suggest we move this one to the next meeting. We take public input.
I was going to just say that.
Yes, please allow guest to talk.
Guest, you are now allowed to speak.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, that was me that raised my hand earlier because it wasn't recording. This is Angela. For these meeting minutes, the November 27th, under item number 3, I don't know if you want to correct it, but it says the following people spoke: Holly Harris and Director Michael Green. So I don't know if you want to take Director off of Michael Green's name.
Is that the supervisor?
Yes.
Thank you. Good call.
Thank you.
So I have a question, Maria. Since this seat was determined vacant,
Yes,
then 7 would be the city task force, so then 4 would be a quorum.
that's what I thought, maybe two, but it's the majority of the body itself. And so even though we have one vacancy, that doesn't mean that it takes our numbers down officially. So we'd have to pass everything by 5.
That might get tough.
Yes, the appointment of somebody for South County public member was on this one, but has been moved to the next available agenda for the board, because I think there were a couple more applications coming in. So yes. It'll be a challenge. Okay, do we have a motion to continue this item, or if we just don't take any action, we can bring it back? But let's see.
And we can continue this item. I second that.
Thank you. All those in favor of continuing this to the next agenda? Anybody opposed? All right, cool. And that's a typographical error, so we don't have to take action on changing that, Ruby, if you just want to correct that for them. Planning Commission update. I'm sure I had something really good to tell you when I asked Ruby to put it on the agenda, but I'm gonna guess that it's an update on the Cannabis Task Force recommendations that have been proceeding so far. So it did go before the Planning Commission. It's now scheduled for the board, but not until its February 5th meeting. The board has a number of special meetings in January, and so all of my stuff is getting like routed. If it's not tomorrow, it's not till February. So they put it on the first February meeting. I'm assuming, I'm hoping that Rebecca and Jennifer at least will attend to help with the commentary, like you've been doing the whole time. Anyone is welcome to attend. All public input is absolutely welcome and valuable, even in person or in Zoom. Any way you want to send it to us. If you want to send written comments prior to that meeting, once the agenda is out, you can click the e-comment link on the agenda, or you can send an email. I would direct it to the administrative office, Johanna or Carolyn, and I don't remember. It's Johanna.DeLong or Carolyn.Purdy, P-U-R-D-Y. Or just send it to me and I'll make sure they get it.
And that's February 6th.
Keep doing that. Thank you. February 6th. Yes. Planning Commission updates or anything else?
Do you think you'll be able to get that as a timed item? Not that that
Yes.
makes a lot of.
No, I will
Okay,
request that.
Yeah.
Writing it down, because I don't know if I did that already or not, but request time. Anything else from Planning Commission real quick? Thursday's meeting, we'll have sort of an annual ethics seminar by our county council. Want to make sure that we're doing these things regularly, both for staff and for deciding bodies such as the Planning Commission, because one, because it's just a smart thing to do, and two, the state has signaled that they're going to start doing audits of jurisdictions that issue cannabis permits. So we just want to make sure that we're clearly showing anyone who cares that we're receiving continual training, professional development regarding making ethical decisions.
Is that gonna be during the planning commission meeting?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
It will be right after assigning chair and vice chair. That way we can get county council in and send them on their way. And then we have 2 cannabis items. Can't remember the first one.
Cruz Family Farms.
Cruz Family Farms, thank you. Oh, and by the way, this is Michelle Iris.
I introduced them all.
Oh, good, okay, our new principal planner. So she will be attending those planning commission meetings with me. Also, she is now the one that is doing final review of staff reports. So I am no longer the bottleneck that's keeping items from going to the planning commission. So you will see a much more robust agenda for them in the future.
Michelle, what's your last name again?
Iris, I-R-A-C-E.
Michelle has extensive experience in planning and CEQA in particular. So we're very, very fortunate to have her on our team. And she's also gluten-free, so I'm no longer alone. Anyway, back to, I digress. I think that, the second cannabis item is higher ground, which we do expect robust public participation on that item, given its proximity to a building that was used as a school like 150 years ago. So that should be interesting. And that's all I've got.
Yes.
Yeah.
This Thursday?
This Thursday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Tell people what time.
Oh, and another thing, we have changed our agendas. We were scheduling them at like 9:05, 9:10, 9:15, and that never happens. It's never a 5-minute item. So we now have, just list them in order, but they're all at 9:05 or shortly thereafter. And that way people can see kind of what order they're in. But we'll no longer use an inaccurate timing system. Okay, now I'm ready to hand it back to you, Andrew.
Okay.
Outline.
Yeah, I just follow up on the Planning Commission. Both cannabis projects are fairly contested and controversial, so I have a lot of public input on both of them. So it should be an interesting Thursday. With that said, moving on to our main discussion topic, a review of the draft outline of Article 73. We've been discussing putting together an outline for the past few months, and at the November 27th meeting, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I was whispering. We're gonna get this minimized so that, because we don't need to look at our room.
Okay.
Want to see your stuff. Right.
Okay. Well, we've been working our way up to this outline, and it was mentioned with really, I guess, no opposition that staff should be the one to put together that outline. So I took that as some marching orders to put together a loose outline. This slide that you're seeing, you've been seeing it for quite a while, and I think of it more as like a progress report so that the task force can see there's an end that we're working towards. It's not an ongoing process that never ends. We've made our way through the purpose with the vision statement, which I'm going to revisit here shortly. We got through applicability and uses permitted. And now we've been gearing up to dive into development standards, performance standards, and all the real nitty-gritty aspects of the ordinance. And then over in the side column, you can see we've also, at the request of the Board of Supervisors, reviewed early activation. We reviewed various ag structures and storefront retail in C2 zoning, as well as we covering definitions, both state and local definitions, and consumption and events, which is going to be an ongoing conversation should the board give us that direction to continue that. We'll find out on February 6th. But with that said, as you have a copy of the new draft outline, which is a much more robust outline of Article 73, but still a preliminary outline, you can see some things have changed from this basic overview of what our task is as a task force. So moving on into the draft outline, in the document that you all received, the first section was purpose and vision statement, which we haven't reviewed or visited since, I believe, September 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and read it just to kind of remind everybody where we were, a year and a half ago. Whereas the vision or the purpose of this ordinance, where the County of Lake Cannabis program is dedicated to the pursuit of a successful, sustainable, vertically integrated, compliant, and thriving cannabis industry that supports job growth and economic prosperity while balancing the needs and preservation of the unique ecological environment of the county, our historical and prehistorical cultural resources, the existing agricultural establishments, and the communities of the county. There's a follow-up sentence, which I'm going to revisit later on in this presentation. Goes on to say, together we can succeed with clear guidelines and expectations of the known and unknown challenges we face both now and in the future. Then, as I hope all of you have had some time to review the outline, it goes on into applicability and uses permitted, which on the previous slide were two separate sections. I put them together into one section here, and then the subsections, you guys have a copy of that. But that basically covers everything we've been working on with that table and that list that has been, kind of a tedious process to get through since last summer into the fall. I'm happy we got through it, and we'll find out the I guess, the final verdict of that on February 6th. The next section of the draft ordinance is general requirements for all cannabis activities. You can see them listed out there. Then it goes on to restrictions and prohibited activities, followed by general development and performance standards, and finally, administrative processes and procedures. Now, I wanted to kind of give you some insight into the logic of putting them together in this sense. When looking at our current ordinance, I was able to break down everything in there based on these 6 sections. We've got applicability and uses permitted, general requirements, restrictions and prohibited activities, development standards, performance standards, and administrative processes and procedures. Kind of redundant to repeat it again, but that is essentially what's covered in our current ordinance. However, our current ordinance it's as mentioned, part of the reason why we're all here, it can be a little tricky to work with from both the users, the applicants, members of the public and other agencies trying to figure out what's what. And a lot of that comes down to the basic organization. So if we look at our current ordinance as is and break it down into these sections, we get a little bit of an alphabet soup. You can see it jumps right into that table of development standards, then some general requirements, then restrictions, and on and on. So the yellow sections here, those would be development standards, general requirements, restrictions. Processes and procedures are in purple. Green would be performance standards, and so on. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip through to kind of see how it's broken down currently, to where it kind of jumps in from one section to another, and the colors are, it's quite varied. So moving through it, I'm not going to dwell on any of this too much. So hopefully we can get through it quickly and open it up to a broader conversation. But this is how the ordinance currently looks. Now, taking those same colors and applying them to the outline that I put together last week, we can see, one, there is no purpose or vision statement in our current ordinance for commercial cannabis. So that's kind of, it's a mini version of a general plan. That's our guiding direction. Whenever there's something in doubt, we can go back and see if it aligns with this vision statement or this purpose. And then we can see it broken down into applicability and uses permitted, which include cultivation activities, which are pretty much going to be there. That's the majority of our cannabis activities. Manufacturing activities, testing activities, retail sales activities, which on-site consumption would be in this section, whether it's allowed or not. We're still waiting the verdict for that. Processing and distribution activities, event activities, again, should they be approved by the board to move forward. And then we also have to remember we need to cover personal and medicinal use activities that do not involve commercial activities, however, but they do require a zoning permit, or at least they currently do, and we can decide whether we want to continue to require that. Moving on, again, the color coding just kind of works with general requirements for all cannabis activities. Now, a lot of these requirements are broken down into different sections, those subsections I just listed. So our current ordinance, there's some redundancies. You see the same things listed in different parts, and this would kind of remove some of that redundancy. Then we get into restrictions and prohibited activities, and then general development and performance standards. Currently, they're together as one section, and then each one has a subsection. If you want to break them off into 2 separate sections, that's an option. We could do that as well. Finally, we get into administrative processes and procedures. One thing that I see that applicants have a hard time with our current ordinance is right when they jump in, they see some development standards, and then they get into the processes and procedures of how to start applying. And if they're just reading it from front to finish, it's like they're starting their application without having fully read through what is allowed, what you can do, what's going to be required if you want to do that, what you can't do, which is very important to highlight from the beginning, then all the specifications of those, and then what processes you need to go through. A lot of people seem to jump into it and they jump right into the process without checking all of that other stuff first. So moving on, let's see. I'm going to go ahead. If I pull this over, you guys see in the PDF on the screen here?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and enlarge this. So again, with this draft outline, it gets into the sections, the subsections, and subsections of subsections. Fewer subsections than what we currently have. But this can also be just kind of a game plan for the next 6 months or hopefully 6 months or so as we get through all of these topics. It dives into a lot of details. Hopefully we can add more to it. Things that haven't been addressed can be factored into it. Some things you may feel like don't apply. We can decide whether it's worth keeping those items or not. But with that said, again, looking into how color coded it would look, you kind of go into these basic sections that are broken down. And this kind of serves a better purpose when you get to here, general development and performance standards. So again, we could make these two separate sections should that be the best option. And if, with this discussion, again, we don't have a consideration. We're not really making a motion on anything. It's starting the conversation. But what we can do is once we decide upon an order, we can go back to the full article outlined and start dissecting this and kind of basically dissecting it and putting it back together and hopefully not I started to use a word that we don't like to use in planning, Frankenstein. We don't want something that's kind of a Frankenstein product to come out of it, but we can take it apart and put it together in a more functional ordinance that's user-friendly. So with that said, there was one comment. We received an email this morning from Mike Wink from CAL FIRE. So we're already starting to get our first set of responses and things to consider when we get into all of our fire mitigation plans. Mike Wink wrote, "Greeting task force leaders. On the agenda this afternoon is the draft outline of Article 73, the Cannabis Ordinance. Some of these activities do occur in the SRA or wildlands. For a few years, I have been asking for the applications and property management plans, we generally call them PMPs, to include wildfire." Is this too small? Can you guys see that? Well, I guess I'll continue to read it in case you can't. So going back to, for a few years, I have been asking the applications and property management plans to include wildfire, emergency response, and similar. I was told that when the plan is revised, that is when that can be added. That time I was told is during this process that the task force is doing, and that is correct. I do see a section on Public Resource Code 4290, 4291 has been added. It's actually currently in there. Everything on that outline is what's already in our current ordinance or article. But it lacks the detail needed based on the property management plans and applications I have seen. Based on the wildland fire activity in the last 10 years, please consider adding the suggested sections. I have indicated them in red below. As this is the draft outline, it seems like this is the time to discuss these additions. Maybe I'm wrong. No, he's correct. Thank you for your time and consideration and leadership. All the best, Mike. And then here he goes on to write the draft outline of Article 73, 2 required application documents, property management plan. He includes a wildland fire prevention response mitigation plan and an all hazard emergency response mitigation plan. And then in site plan requirements, we have fire water tank plan per NFPA 1142 drawings plan calculations. And then again, PRC, Public Resource Code 4290 and 4291 compliance drawing plans. So that is there for your consideration. In the outline itself, those items are generally found when we go back to the development standards, which has 4290 compliance here. And then when we get in performance standards, a lot of the specific fire requirements, including California Fire Code, CFC Section 202, Group F1 occupancy, carbon dioxide for manufacturing, and then Chapter 38, which primarily deal with volatile manufacturing, which we have not seen in this county. And I think the cannabis industry is it doesn't feel like it's going in that direction, but I could be wrong. Maybe Jennifer and Nara can speak to that. Anyway, with that said, that concludes my presentation. I'm going to pass it on. Hopefully we could take a look at this and maybe, since we're not making motions on anything, just kind of, first provide your thoughts and then maybe use it as a game plan for the rest of the year. So we can kind of have some things scheduled out and a timeline that we can expect to kind of start checking these things off the boxes and getting this ordinance ready to move forward. All right, Maria, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the task force?
Andrew, could you, send out a copy of that email?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know
I
if
thought
anybody else
Ruby did
wants it.
already.
Yeah, please.
He CC'd a handful of people, but not everyone. But yeah, we can upload it. We also have a lot of public comments from the workshops we did back in May of 2022, which we had talked about revisiting. But I think there was a discussion maybe waiting until the board gives their final say on the permitting and zoning tables.
Would it be helpful if going forward, the public input that we have collected gets sort of labeled, like what section it goes in, or what section in our new outline it would be pertaining to?
Yes,
That way,
totally
you
do
don't
that.
have to worry about forgetting what fire districts are saying. It'll just be pulled in. So Ruby, as we get public input, just make sure you're tagging it by the number of the appropriate section. And then when we get to that section, because instead of diving into 72, what I'd like to do is go with 73 and pull in the 72 stuff that's pertinent in each section. And that way we would pull in both what is currently in Article 72, what public input has said to that specifically, and address it in that chunk. Does that sound efficient? Okay, good. Andrew, do you have any problem with that?
No, that's exactly what I had hoped to do.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, any questions, discussion?
I have some comments.
Okay.
Where
This
we,
is Jennifer Smith.
Jennifer speaking. Where we have the development standards in section 5, would it make sense to have the development standards by activity? So the development standards for cultivation within the permitted cultivation activities section. Because some will apply to parts, some of these development standards that we have listed will apply to different activities.
Mhm.
And for example, hours of operation under performance standards, hours of operation might differ from a cultivation site versus manufacturing versus retail. And so it seems to have that specific information within the activity. And then
To make a quick response, I'd organize in a way to where the first section would be those overall requirements, and you can see there's specific cultivation, specific processing, specific manufacturing, and so on. Just because the current ordinance has so many redundancies, in the way it's organized like that.
So the way it's currently set up, it would require a lot less space because it won't be so repetitive. So if you can see, the first 12 things are pretty standard across the board. It's just those others that are specialized. And so by keeping them all together in the development standards, then as in the beginning, when we cover these different things, they're all applicable to the appropriate code sections in that section.
And we could take hours of operation out of the, what's required for everybody, and in here in specific performance standards, which is also another section, just cover those for each different permitted use and what's specifically required for those. So that's very doable.
Or if during our discussion, if we start finding that a lot of them are not standard as we thought, then we'll flesh out the specific standards too. Yeah.
I think we'll see as we go how that works.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my input might be too micro for discussion today since we're not voting or taking action.
We're just talking about the overall structure of the ordinance.
Yeah.
I do have one other point that I forgot to mention. As we move forward and as we've learned lessons from last year, with each new version of this draft that we move forward, you will have the date and time for that meeting right up there at the top. So, with the zoning and permitting table, how there was confusion because we had so many different versions of that table bouncing around, that each one of these will have a date and time stamp on it. So,
Yay.
So can I just add something? So under exclusion zones, Andrew, you don't have farmer protection farmers.
I'm sorry, we don't have what?
The farmland protection zone?
Let's see here. Exclusion zones. That is correct because this is based on exactly what's in our ordinance, and we have not been using Unicode, which we will be soon. But essentially, because that was a standalone section, we do have farmland. There is farmland protection in here. Let me find it.
So have
Yeah,
you
because it's
been,
not really an exclusion,
Yeah,
it's
and
just
and
additional
some of these aren't
specifications.
really exclusion, it's
Yeah.
just specific distance to sensitive use areas.
Mhm.
So I
Like it
guess
would be
my-
specific cultivation development standards then.
yeah, so kind of to go off that though, but have there been other things where the board has kind of adopted later on outside of Article
Yes.
17, kind of like the farmland protection zone, which have been kind of piecemealed into the overall cannabis ordinance?
Yeah, there have been a number of ordinances. One of them changed the date for the notice of applicability, to increase the number of applications. Others, we're talking specifically about, fines, revocation, things like that. Tightening up that part of the ordinance. And I don't remember any other ones. Andrew, do you?
Oh, I wasn't listening to the ones you said. I'm sorry, but yeah, there's a handful, which we do need to visit. I mean, we should probably dedicate it
Yeah, it's really-
one whole meeting to reviewing all of those. Farmland protection, the 3106 for hydrology studies and drought management plans. There was our recent ordinances that we just passed, but that was with the task force. But yeah, we can go. They're all on the Community Development Department Cannabis website.
That's why I just wanna make sure we're not like leaving those extra items out, we're
Right.
looking this
Yeah.
as a holistic process.
So then,
And
Ruby, and Andrew, when we pull in appropriate sections of 72, we'll also pull in appropriate sections of post 72 ordinances.
Yeah,
so
it makes more sense to include them here.
Yeah.
Than,
So-
Why
in
does
this-
that in Article 7, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
that's all
And-
I'm there with that.
Good point.
okay. Well, aside from, I believe it's Ordinance 3101 and 3103 that deal with farmland protection, there's very similar language laid out in the farmland protection section here under Article 2713, subsection 8T. That is one thing to note. The separate ordinance on farmland protection and the separate ordinance on the hydrology report and drought management plan, a lot of ways, it's kind of a mirror of the language that's already in the ordinance. It's just a little bit more highlighted and a little bit more specified as to the requirements. So we do have the farmland protection section in there, at least in the current ordinance.
Additionally, our online zoning code should have been updated by Municode, but I have not gone back to check for its accuracy. So it would be good just to make sure that we've got all the details. It's not a huge number of ordinances, so yeah, that'd be great.
That would have been in this yellow general development standard section here, as highlighted in yellow here. Thanks for catching that.
Great outline. You did a great job.
Well, it's been kind of in the back of my mind for 6 months, so it was kind of easy to put it on paper.
One of Andrew's strengths is actually sort of organizational structure. He's really good at how he's organized our internal e-drive for cannabis permits so that it's easy to find stuff. And so I'm pretty glad that he was the one doing this. Are there any other questions from task force? And if not, we'll go to the Zoom.
Also could I add, under, I don't even know what it is, but it's the last section, expiration, revocation, and withdrawal.
Okay.
I recommend that we also add the process for fallow. Because I know we do have the option to.
Oh, yeah. I did not specify too much on this because a lot of it's missing. It's not in our ordinance. So we need to build a lot of stuff and add it in there. So that's something to keep in mind.
The not cultivating for the year or reduced cultivation is kind of just internal policy right now, right? Andrew?
Yeah, but we could get that codified. That'd be nice.
Good idea.
And also, I mean, we have a withdrawal process. I added that, or like a relinquish a permit. We have a lot of people who have, obtained a use permit. They don't want it, but there's not a clear path to just terminate the permit as other than letting it expire. So that would be something we could visit when we get to the end of the procedures and processes.
All right, let's go to Zoom. Who's got their hand up? Andrew?
Sarah Bodner, you are now allowed to talk.
Hi there. Happy New Year, everyone. This is Sarah Bodner, Policy Director for LCCA. And I wanted to let the task force know that our policy working group met and went over this outline. And we think that Andrew's work is a huge improvement. And we're very supportive of the outline and this effort to start anew in how we organize the policy so that it makes a lot more sense. And I think it's also going to give us a streamlined way to update and address certain things in the ordinance that, as operators, we have a lot of input on, and look forward to compiling the last several years of experience into some concise talking points going forward about where we'd like to see some changes in the ordinance, some things that were envisioned back in 2017 that are no longer relevant or have been very, very hard to implement or impact operations. So I think we've been awaiting, the right structure to bring forth those recommendations, and we feel like this is it. So we're really grateful for Andrew bringing the organizational thinking to this. And I think that as we embark on making a lot of changes, it's going to be really helpful to have a new structure versus trying to make changes within what has been like a patchwork quilt of many changes over many years. So thank you. We're supportive and we look forward to what comes next.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other hands raised in the Zoom? No. Okay, then we'll bring it back to the task force. There's no requirement for ratification or any action necessary.
Would you like the LCCA to bring forth recommendations per category? So we have a starting place to talk from? It seems in the past that's sort of helped.
You're welcome to do that. So far, what we're going to do is pull together what's from Article 72, what's from any of those other ordinances. If LCCA wants to send in their input, absolutely.
Okay.
That's great.
And do you...
If Ag wants to send in their, if anybody, any organization or agency, it's awesome. Sorry to keep talking, but you all come from different points of view, and so that's just where your input is really vital.
Do you envision, does the team envision, let's say next week we're going to tackle applicability and uses permitted, all of them, or just?
Well, we've generally covered that section with the table and the list that that's going to the Board of Supervisors. So we could, here, I'm at the tail end. And one thing I also forgot to mention when I revisited the current proposal with the vision statement, that last sentence was good for direction for the task force, but I'm not sure if it fits into the ordinance. And also this vision statement was approved by the task force so long ago, it was before we were moving things through Planning Commission and Board. So we should probably discuss a way to bring it forward to, do you think it could go straight to the Board of Supervisors, or should it go through the review like everything else? Just a heads up on that one. But with to get back to your initial question, since we mostly covered this, we're just waiting for the green light, whether we should scratch a couple sections or keep them in there. We could probably start jumping right into general requirements for all cannabis activities. Maybe after reviewing all the other separate one-off ordinances related to cannabis, or however else you see fit to do it.
I think general requirements is good because those are not going to change. But we are still waiting for that February 6th meeting for the board to give us direction on what types of cannabis permits we will be developing these standards for.
I do want to circle back to Jennifer's question though, even if we start on general requirements, do we want to plan on moving through A, B, and C at our next meeting? Or, having a plan how we're going to work through just that section? Or will we get through the whole section in one meeting?
Like, is there the ability to have a marathon meeting? Sorry.
I don't know that a marathon meeting would be
I guess
productive.
not.
Yeah, we've kept it as a 90-minute meeting for, just for that reason. But what I'd like to do, I don't want to short us. I wouldn't want to make too small of a list. And some of these will go quickly. Some of them may take some more robust discussion.
Could we do something where, for example, we're gonna do A, B, C, and D, and in the event that we finish those under this time frame, be prepared to potentially talk about E, F, G? And
Well,
if
what
not,
we-
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So you have like a tentative list,
What I'm
but,
thinking is let's take at least half of it. If we don't
Right.
get to it, it just moves on to the next meeting.
right,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I'm thinking. Nods? Any comments?
Yeah, I just think having a plan for that will be really helpful for recommendations.
Mhm.
A number of these things in general requirement are also required at the state, so there's really not a lot to discuss anyway. So maybe let's not do just half. Let's take the whole shebang for general requirements and we'll get through what we get through.
Yeah, whatever we don't just carry over to.
Exactly. Collecting public input and any other input or task force input along the way as well. Sound good? All right. Excellent. What's next? Oh, were there any additional hands to address this issue in Zoom last call?
Not at the moment.
Okay, then we're gonna move on to public comments. Are there any comments from the public that pertain to what's under the purview of the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force but was not on today's agenda?
We have Holly Harris.
Over here. Oh, good. Go ahead, Holly. Did you ask her to unmute? Oh, go ahead, Holly.
Yeah,
Hi, okay.
we can hear you. Oh, now you're muted.
Okay, got it. I think I have it now. So anyway, I think you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the meeting, Maria, but did you say something about the public position going to the board?
Yes, it was tentatively scheduled for tomorrow, but it has been continued to, I think maybe another week or two for the board to consider because from what I heard, there were additional applications coming in. And
Okay, so I guess my question is, would it be possible for you to make more of a public sweep on this, such as sending out the notification to everybody on the task force email list and maybe resending out to press reports? Because frankly, the only place I've seen it anywhere is on the cannabis page, which most of the public is not going to be visiting. And the only other place I saw it was on the Ukiah Daily Journal, which I'm not sure how many people read that.
yeah, no problem. We have that notice that I think the board office did that Ruby can send out to our email list and maybe do another press release.
Yes.
I would actually consult with Johanna regarding a press release to the media because that costs money. And it is kind of, for any board appointed position, the administrative office takes lead, the clerk of the board's office takes lead, but we'll confer and we'll definitely send it out to all our email list. That's a great idea. Thank you, Holly.
Okay, thank you.
For any other public input? Or public comment?
Currently, no.
I'm not seeing any hands.
Seeing none, we'll just go ahead and move to adjournment.
So before we adjourn, just to clarify for the next meeting, and one, if any of you from the Cannabis Alliance or any other point of view from the task force, if you guys want to make any changes or recommendations, those outlines and send them to me, I'll incorporate it into the second version of the draft. I'm sure we're going to have several versions of this. And then do you guys want to visit the additional ordinances and then general requirements for the next meeting?
I think instead of revisiting the ordinances as a separate agenda item, we're just gonna integrate it into what we present.
When we get to that.
Yeah, so all the
Okay.
stuff from 72, the additional ordinances, if they need to be called out, if they're not already codified in 72, and any agency or group or public input for that particular section.
Referral docs.
There you go.
Basically,
Yes.
reference.
Okay.
But let's just dive in to the general standards.
Sounds good. I think we're ready.
Excellent. We're moving. All right, I don't think we need a motion to adjourn. We'll just go ahead and adjourn at 1:55.
When's the next meeting?
Next meeting, 2 weeks from now, right, Andrew?
January
I believe so. Ruby can confirm that.
January 22nd.
Thank you.
All right.
Is that